Okay, so today we are glad to see Chojy here. Why don't you say a few words for us, Chojy, as we go around?
I am a Rochester City School District teacher, and I continue to volunteer almost with all schools. And we have University of Rochester and a few community members, and I have a particular tutoring program for children in the city at the University of Rochester on Saturdays. It's free for all the kids to come. So, and basically we are trying to make sure that they are always, it's not just about homework, but they understand what learning is.
Okay, great.
And I'm particularly concerned about this new report. And again, the choice of superintendents, and I don't like the way things work in the district that are always hardly ever transparent. And we just hear all of a sudden, and then they tell us, come the community member, we want to hear from you, come you, Pam, but in reality, we don't see that.
First thing, we wanted to go over some of the things that we've been worrying about as far as what the school board is going to be doing to find a new superintendent. And one of the things that a lot of people have been doing, you're involved with some that are trying to get word back to the board that they'd like some input on what does that report that got sent in really say. And the other issue is the report that came out. I forwarded to quite a few people. Well, this was the one from Shawgi Tell. Does he pronounce it Shawgi Tell or what? Shawgi
Tell.
Okay. So anyways, the board, and I'm not sure who else received it, but he points out that a lot of the things that the state has done and that the distinguished educator is talking about is kind of pushing in the direction of privatization of schools, and that there's a lot of activity. I don't know if you read through the whole report, because it makes some of the ones I send out look very.
It was really good, though.
It's fantastic. I'm reading it and saying, I hate the thought of forwarding something before I read through the whole thing. But
It's beautiful. He really is. He's a very brilliant.
And
very humanistic. And he cares about these issues, and he understands that this whole business of privatization of public school has been at the heart of that since Reagan. I mean, people think this is a new thing. This has been going on and on and on. It keeps taking different names. Charter schools are destroying our public schools. Charter schools that are under the auspices of Rochester City School District in other districts, we are paying for those 95% kids who are attending those schools. Every bus, we are paying for it. Every van that is private, we are paying. The speech teacher, we are paying. Whatever. I mean, I'm just giving as an example. And it's all going from our kids. And we just don't realize that this is, how unbelievably problematic this is. And everybody keeps saying, and they can choose. They can make their choices. They can say, I want you, but I don't want her, because she doesn't fit in what I'm doing, or I don't have what she. Public schools cannot do that. So I think we all need to be very aware of what charter schools are doing to our educational system.
And as much as the Aquino Report criticizes some of the things that have been happening in Rochester, that the board has been micromanaging, but if it weren't for the board listening to what we've been saying for the last 6 years, School 16 would be closed and still be closed, and just about the only way we've gotten anything to happen in Rochester is to lean on the board and convince them that this or that is something that should be listened to. You'll probably hear a lot from us in the coming months.
I'd say that Dawn was responsive. So, what I liked that he did, he had those little coffee and conversation. Just him and
Patty Malgieri, yeah.
Malgieri. You could go in, you could talk about anything you wanted, and very few people, it was John and I and 2 other people, I think, took advantage of it. But he did it every month.
Yeah, and the thing is, though, that if he didn't, he was under the gun from the state, which again gets back a little bit to the question of the Aquino Report, to close schools, and once he got the board to agree, or he had an opportunity to close 16 because of some of the conditions there, and he did that, and then if we hadn't gotten the board to pass a resolution to renovate and reopen it, hey, hello, how you doing? I think there's an agenda over there. Welcome to who it is. Thank you. Just
But that I would say is not sort of the micromanaging that he was concerned, Aquino was concerned.
No. Yeah, I kind of wonder sometimes when, you look at all the times that we were able to get somebody from the board to listen, and, if it hadn't been for Mary really bent over backwards and trying to get proposals into the board so that we could try to keep 16 open. Hopefully we weren't the bad guys that Aquino's talking about in terms of driving micromanagement, but
So it's a pretty big facility, right?
so but you look at the all the things that come down from the state, such as the School 41, for instance, the hell that they've put that the teachers and that school through. They put it into receivership. Half the teachers got replaced because about half of them left because of the lengthened day and the various upheaval that a school goes through when it goes into receivership, and they're just getting the structure back together. Wasn't quite where they wanted to, so the state forced them to once again close that school, reopen it under a new name and a new structure, and again drove out half the teachers. And it isn't just the teachers in that school that get pushed around and have an upheaval. The whole system goes through that upheaval because there were teachers from 44 that ended up going to 41 after it was went into state receivership.
They're extenuating circumstances. So that was what was so upsetting about School 41.
Yeah, that was sad to see that happen, and it hurts the sense of community, because people who were part of Kodak Park School 41 and lived in the neighborhood, and suddenly it's got a new name, and it just it's total disregard for the community, from what I can see, the way they go about it.
It's an allegiance to numbers, not people or community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as much as they talked about the critique that people weren't working for adults rather than children in the Rochester
In this
City
case,
School
the state.
District.
Yes.
The state is kind of doing the same thing. And as I was going back looking at the list of superintendents that we've seen over the many years, and when Laval Wilson was here and Peter McWalters, and so many things. Superintendents, I wish we'd kept Peter, because he would have been here till 2009 if his stay at Rhode Island is any indication. But even back then, one of the big complaints that the various departments and people in the school district had were all the unfunded mandates that the school got from federal government and state government, and rules and regulations that kind of pushed the district this way or that. One of the biggest things we've been complaining about, in terms of the crosstown busing and the upheaval it causes towards neighborhood schools, that's partly the state regulation, and you wonder, why can't they change the regulation for 1.5 mile? You have to be bused 1.5 miles to get reimbursement. Well, that guarantees in a city like Rochester that parents can always find a school 1.5 miles away to send their child to.
But also, given that rule and the 1.5 mile radius from 316, there's nobody in the 19th ward who can get busted. It's staggering when you look at the map.
Yeah. This is the 1.5 mile circle around School 16, and
If you live far enough out on the airport site, you can get busted.
Yeah.
and it's, you say 1.5 miles, my gosh, any child that, you start them walking pretty darn close to Cornhill,
Yeah.
and they're supposed to walk to School 16. It's the 1/2 mile that they've been pushing for is more reasonable. And back in the day that the schools were being built, they're all kind of within about 1 mile, 1/2 mile from one another, so they were within a decent walking distance for kids. But the fact that we've gone to so much busing has helped the city school district close some of those schools, and now one of their one of the things that you'll hear is that it you can pass it around if you'd like. The fact they can't bus, if they bus them less than 1.5 miles, it has to be basically the school district that pays for that money. They don't get reimbursed. So we've pretty much driven about 80% of the kids get bused. So they're getting bused generally more than 1.5 miles. I guess from what we've heard this year, they're trying to, the process that the district is using is select how many kids do you have that need to be bused in, for instance, to School 16, and then you set up the bus routes that you're going to have based on where those kids are that have applied. And if buses still have space on them, then once they've got the routes set up, they'll backfill the buses and try to snake their way through within that 1.5 mile to pick up some kids who have asked to go to School 16, but they have to, and they start with kindergartners first, which makes total sense. But still, that means that a child has to apply to go to School 16 before they ever know whether they're going to get busing or not. and parents are very uneasy about saying that their kid's going to have to walk to school, especially if you're looking at kindergartners and early kids. And we don't have too many stay-at-home moms or dads these days, at least not if they've managed to get a job. And so it's really a situation that if you look at the way the state is handling this, I mean, it doesn't take a genius to say we're busing 80% of the kids a mile and a half or more. What if we end up busing 100% of them for 5 blocks or 10 blocks? It's got to be cheaper, and you get a heck of a lot better results if you have the community involvement with the local schools, because when your kids are going to some other school, if somebody's closing the school down the street, not my school. So anyways, and that kind of goes back to structural racism. Would we be doing this if we didn't have one of the poorest school districts in the state? And
one of the biggest problems, for instance, I look at some of the kids that I know and the parents are complaining about the busing with number 5. I mean, imagine where number 5 is, and the kids have to walk from way up Dewey Avenue, have kindergartner who does not speak English. The parents, one has to give up the job, and then what else can he do? Either the father is angry, he wants to work, he wants to, for instance, in the summer to pick fruit up, whatever, whatever job he can find. But he can't do it because the kindergartner from up Dewey Avenue walk to number 5, it's, by the way, a very good school, I like it. And then, I mean, he's not the only one, I'm just using one example because I've gone downtown and cried about that situation. It's just ludicrous, the whole idea of the safety. I'm not even talking about 19th Ward is a lot safer in terms of, not that there is right to make kids walk there, but at least in terms of safety. But when you think of 17, number 5, these are places where these kids are coming to a lot of traffic and some funny business going on around. It's just incomprehensible. You can't believe that people would expect these kids to do that. When the Muslim kids were being sometimes attacked by people who were, we had to go downtown and talk about that to it's a question of safety more than anything else. And we have to care about our kids. And that's the word that it just doesn't seem to care, empathy.
That is one of the things I heard when I was canvassing. Parents said that they decide how many students are in the area, so no bus actually comes to the front door of the kids, and they designate this one area that's close to a segment of them. And when there's snow, there's no snow removal. So how do you get the kid down the street with all the snow, etc., when the bus won't come to the individual homes? So I've been hearing about that.
Yeah, it's really a big issue. And somewhere in here I had that report for the here we go, transportation legislation. This goes back to I think 2013 from what I've heard from Mary, but they had, basically the big argument is, gee, if you reduce the from 1.5 miles to half a mile, then gee, kids that are in this overall circle you'd have so many fewer walking because you've got a half a mile. Well, this may be the case if you've got one school in the middle of a little village somewhere, that it's going to cost you that much more to to have the kids bused instead of walking. But if we look at, this is just most of the southern part. So here's the 19th Ward here, but you can pick any of these other schools that are a mile and a half away to send your child to. And it may not be, the objective of the managed school choice program was to give every child an equal opportunity to go to some of the best schools in the district. And the objective originally was to improve the ones that weren't being selected very often and make all the schools better. But they forgot about really following up on improving the ones that weren't being picked. So if you pick a school that's, on par with 16 that's on the other side of town, you can get busing. And the unfortunate thing is that by the time you've done that, you can't easily go to your child's play or the teacher conference or whatever is going on. There's a disconnect then for parents being involved with their school. When somebody decides to close, the school over here near where you live, if you aren't sending your kids there, there's not the same neighborhood rising to protect the school, and you're not as worried about, gee, if there's some gangs hanging around near that school, not my kids going there. They're just, it hurts neighborhoods. And that's what we're doing, and the state is complicit in that they've got regulations. They complain about the cost there is to education, but even if you look at the $1 billion or close to $1 billion that the city school district gets, and we've got about $66 million in busing, if you increased the busing by $1 million even, that's nothing compared to the money you're wasting on the overall system because of the damage that's been done by moving kids all over town and hurting the neighborhoods. Because if kids come home from 16 to somewhere here, they play with the friends that they made at school, same thing with 29, you have a neighborhood building effect from the kids that go to schools in the neighborhood. When they're going to school on the other side of the southern zone, or actually they end up going all over the place the way it goes right now, you can't go home and play with your friends from school. And the families don't get to meet one another. I remember when I was over on Seneca Parkway and Jocelyn was going to a school near there, the parents, we knew a lot of the parents that had kids going to the same schools. And the same thing, has been the case in the 19th Ward, had a lot of people that were familiar with neighbors because of the school bringing their kids together. And but somehow that, instead of really seeing the state pushing to solve those problems, the Aquino Report doesn't quite mention that. Was there something in there that addressed the busing issue?
Not to my recollection. There's something on operations. I don't, no, they didn't address this 1.5 mile thing.
No.
Didn't address the managed choice policy. I was looking at different boulders.
Yeah, the managed, going back to when the board ended up basically in the 3 paths forward there, I happened to stumble into, I went to a board meeting for something else and then stayed there as the board members were being walked around through all the various displays. And as I'm looking at it, there didn't seem to be, as much discussion. It almost was, come over here, accept this, come over here, accept that. And then the final conclusion was, well, we'll pick the same thing we had before, but we'll just try to do it right this time, was kind of the outcome of that selection process. it seemed a little bit too led by the district to me. What was your take on it? You were at that meeting, right?
Yeah, it was an ESA meeting. Yeah, I'd say we didn't have enough discussion about it. But my recollection about that, my sense of it was that we didn't, it was too complicated, given the budget and the money and all that, to shift towards the neighborhood schools at this short-term period, although in a long-term setting, that would be preferable. So my takeaway, my walk-away message was, we'd like to get here, but we can't do that now. We have to do this short-term. So how we get from here to there is the big question.
Yeah. The second option, which was kind of a blend of the managed school choice policy plus trying to give more emphasis to going to the local school, I would have thought would be something that would be manageable, but that didn't seem to get much support. We had that task force that lasted the whole
6
summer.
months, right.
You remember that well, John.
When I'm listening to this conversation, what we should have said, instead of managed choice, manageable choice.
Manageable choice.
Yeah. But and I think it also draws, one of the issues I think with the district is things are in silos. And when you have that sort of structure, you need communication across those
Right.
silos.
And, one thing that Aquino did talk about in the report, it wasn't specifically about the managed choice, but he did say that these special committees, like the one we did, managed choice, like the climate, like the special ed one that was just done, that we need to redo our bylaws around those so that the superintendent is really directing it, so it's not just a board initiative that, we do all this work and then it sits out there, that it really needs to be integrated with the superintendent and directed so so it's not siloed, just like what you're saying. So because we did all that work and then we presented it and then she can do as, whether or not. It's an advisory committee, but much better to have it sort of all along, more directed and more integrated as the discussion develops. And I think that was a good suggestion. So we'll be, I'm sure, having changes in bylaws so that these advisory committees are better integrated. I don't think she ignored it, and I think that, the special ed, the climate, the managed choice, all of these were considered, but, we didn't get the sense of that when we were doing the committee so much, right?
Yeah.
And again, there's that community engagement piece that would be much better if the superintendent was there and it was clearly integrated as we were moving forward.
So were you saying that it would be good if the superintendent was there because of the community engagement?
The way our bylaws are written right now, the president can approve a special committee. Say if a board member wants to go into some area like the climate, like the special ed, like we did the managed choice. But it's a board member kind of doing this, and it's separate. And then at the end, you present it to the superintendent. Much better, his suggestion is to put it underneath the superintendent.